Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Friday, January 16th. Derek Van Riper here with Eno Saris. On this episode, we resume our position preview series at second base. If you are new to the series, we have episodes out already for shortstop and third base. The series just started this week. And it's going to continue on into early February. We'll take breaks for big news pods. And we had the Kyle Tucker emergency pod after he signed with the Dodgers late Thursday. So we'll continue to keep up with everything going on around the league. The way these work, though, we dig into average draft position from early fantasy baseball drafts, break up the players by group, where they're going, talk about whether they're overvalued, undervalued, or appropriately priced, and try to figure out performance expectations for the upcoming season. So with that, let's get right back to it. This is a position we disagree about right off the top because Eno likes second base, and I'm kind of just indifferent towards it. I think it's appropriately priced almost across the board, and I'll explain why on a position-by-position, or player-by-player level. Let's start at the top. Two inside the top 30, Jazz Chisholm Jr., who is also eligible at third base. That's probably going to go away after 2026. And Ketel Marte, who has been subject of trade rumors for the better part of the last 2 months, but more recently, his GM or president of baseball operations, Mike Hazen, coming out and saying they're not going to move Ketel Marte. So we'll see if he sticks true to his word. Jazz is interesting to me, though, Eno, because I think we had a very positive Jazz Chisholm Jr. experience in his first full season with the Yankees. He went 30-30. He did it despite reaching just 531 plate appearances, knocked the ground ball rate under 40% for the first time since 2022. Health has always been a little bit elusive for Jazz. 600 plus plate appearances is not the expectation you have going in, but based on usage, I think he does have the opportunity, if he can avoid injuries, of actually being a near max volume sort of player. And it seems like skills-wise, he's living right at his peak right now. I was a little bit surprised he's not a top 30 overall hitter in the Fangraphs player rater from 2025, despite putting 30-plus homers and 30-plus steals on the board. Some of that comes from being a little bit down in batting average, though, in roto leagues.
And some of it might also come from the 75 runs and 80 RBI that Jazz Chisholm put up because of the injuries. He didn't quite get to those bigger numbers there. I'm into him. I like Jazz Chisholm, and I wanted to point out that in contract years, and he is a free agent to be, it's hard to find an overall effect because there are players who play badly in their contract year and have to take pillow contracts and so on and so forth. But the one thing that I've seen, I think, reliably shown is that they play. And I think that people in a contract year don't want that injury tag on them. They want to give as much playing time as they. I think anecdotally, I think they also steal bases because they think that might help their next contract number. So I don't know. I could see a 650 plate appearance, 40 steal season from Jazz this year, and I think that the projections are much more sober. And even if you take the Steamer projection, which is only for 552 plate appearances, that's a model-based projection we found. I asked Jared Cross about, Nick Kurtz's playing time projection, and he said that basically his playing times are model-based. So there's a model there that's projecting plate appearances as opposed to a human being doing depth charts. And so he projects 552 plate appearances for Jazz Chisholm, 27 homers, 27 steals, 242 average. And even with all that and being that negative about him, it's still an $18 player. And I don't think that's too far off of where he should be taken in the draft. I think he's fine where he is. And then, of course, Ozzie likes him better because he's young and has good bat speed.
Yeah, I think the categorical juice you're getting from Jazz with power and speed leading the way, runs and RBIs probably being really good over a full healthy season, and average maybe not hurting you, gives him a really intriguing floor. You're looking at him against guys at other positions. So it's in a redraft league, Kyle Tucker versus Jazz Chisholm, or Jackson Chourio versus Jazz Chisholm, or a UT only guy, Kyle Schwarber, who does very different things than Jazz, right? And Pete Alonso, who also does some pretty different things than Jazz. So it does seem like he's in this little pocket where Some people look at him as a first round or potential first round talent that falls into the middle of round 2. I understand where that ceiling comes from. I think you have to adjust expectations accordingly because of that past injury history. But you may be right. Maybe this is the year in the walk year where he's able to get up over 600 plate appearances and put it all together. What do you think about Ketel Marte right now? He's going just a little outside the top 30, but I think there's a case for him inside the top 30. Still a D-back for now. Great real-life player. Maybe slightly less value in roto leagues because the stolen bases have evaporated over time. And he's been just below 600 plate appearances in 3 of the last 4 seasons. So you get a little bit of injury risk compared to the other guys that usually go in the first couple of rounds, and you don't get that extra categorical spike, even in the form of like 12 or 15 steals. It looks like it's more of a single-digit total you're going to get from Ketel Marte in any given year, in part because he's dealt with a lot of leg injuries over the last 4 seasons.
Yeah, I forget what I got back for Ketel Marte, but I traded him last offseason because I was just worried about the soft tissue muscle injuries, the age, the stuff starting to catch up to him. But I guess I was a year too early on that one. And, I think it's worth putting up here are the players that Steamer loves more than Oopsie. And if you look at this list, it's littered with veterans. It is the list of veterans. And we know this because Jordan Rosenblum himself said that he has a system that uses bat speed aging, and it might be more aggressive aging than anybody else. So you see Semien, Altuve, and Ketel Marte are on this list. Jeff McNeil. These are veterans that Oopsie, Oopsie likes better. I think it's fine. I think if you want to stay, the only reason that I wouldn't necessarily make sure I got Ketel Marte, because Ketel Marte and Jazz Chisholm Jr. are the only $20 guys here. The only reason that I wouldn't, just take them and try to stay in the $20 territory is that I just think that, and this is the reason I love second base, I just think there's a lot of credible options later, and they can give you power and speed up and down the position. Maybe not a ton of power and a ton of speed, but like there are a lot of just okay players, and I think paying a small price for an okay player might make more sense for you on Ketel Marte. And one last note about the aging curves and Jordan Rosenblum. So Tom Tango showed an aging curve that was aggressive. We've showed that on the podcast before. That suggests that somebody like Kyle Tucker would lose like 3 miles of bat speed between his 28 season and his age 28 season and his age 39 season. That a lot of that aging happens after 32, but that's the aging curve that Tom Tango put out there. Well, Steven Sutton Brown, the aging curve that he does, just not to get too far in the weeds, it's called the Delta method. What you do is you take one player at age 28 and you take him at 29, you compare him to himself, and then you weight the change there by how many plate appearances you have. And you do that for all the players. So you match player to player, age to age, and then you do it like that. Steven Sutton Brown used a different approach. It's called the Gaussian process, and I can't tell you exactly how that works, but it's a different kind of an approximation, and it basically is half as agreed, like it's half the aging. So I'm looking here at his, and it's on Blue Sky, and maybe I can share it in the assets, which I'm now sharing on Discord in the episode channel. I'm sharing all the visual assets. But basically, he suggests that Kyle Tucker would only lose about a tick and a half. And these two, the reason I wanted to just bring up these two methods is Steamer and Oopsie. So think about how you feel about aging. Think about these players. Do you think Marcus Semien, Jose Altuve, and Ketel Marte are going to age better or worse than the general population? Do you like one approach better than the other? Do you personally, I know there's people in the Discord who are like, I don't love taking any players over 30. And it's totally makes sense. We know that projections get worse after 30. The reliability of projections gets worse after 30. We know that aging, like there are things that happen at 32 and 34 that just really fall off the cliff. So, I get it, but there are potential values here. And Ketel Marte seems to be in the middle of his career doing good things.
Yeah, I think it's almost like a switch hitting version of Corey Seager for a roto profile, right? He hits the ball pretty hard, offers very little in stolen bases, but the power, the run production, and the average should all be really good on a per game basis. And if he finds that path to a completely healthy season, then you end up with a guy that's maybe slightly underpriced, going just inside the top 35 overall right now. But the steamer projections, consistently do skew to the guys with longer track records. I think if you're looking for oatmeal at a certain part of your draft, you're probably leaning on steamer. If you're looking for some chilaquiles, you're probably going to Oopsie, because you want to take the more exciting path with the bat speed being accounted for, and it's going to aggressively drag some guys down, but it's going to aggressively push some guys up too, and that might be what you're looking for, given where you're at in a particular build.
Yeah, I think when you get to the next tier, you mentioned it's a tier of one.
A tier of one. The cheese stands alone. It's just Brice Turang.
By my comp dollar values, it does make sense because you have two $20 players. In fact, the comp dollar values suggest that Ketel Marte should be the number one guy, maybe because of that steamer influence. But they're both $20 guys. And then Turang is a $12 guy, and then there's a few $10 guys after that. So, that does make sense. There's a bit of a tier of one here. He's also, has the potential, I think, to be the number one second baseman. Like if he continued to grow power-wise, and then he went back to some of the speed he showed the year before last, I mean,
yeah,
he could be like a 20-40 guy, and if Jazz got hurt at all, Turang could be the number one guy. So, he has the upside, he has the youth, he has power, he has speed. So I think there's a lot to like there. One thing that I want to say about Turang is that he grew 5 points of barrel rate. So his barrel rate went up 5%, and that's his quality of contact stats, very predictive for future power. The problem is that since he went up 5 points, you would regress him. And so what I did was I looked at all of the past 5 percentage points increases where players played 400 plate appearances in both seasons. And I looked at them, and there was 19 seasons like that they had 5 points or more, and they went up. The average decrease the next year was 2 points. So I think on average, what you would do with Turang, and this is what all the projections do, is you would regress his power, and you would say he's less likely to hit even 16 homers or 18 homers as he did last year, and you'd project him to, the BATX says 12, Oopsie says 15, something like that, which does could dampen your enthusiasm a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the power really ticked up in the second half. 12 out of his 18 homers were hit in the final 63 games. And the thing that I hadn't really thought a lot about until getting ready for this episode was that Brice Turang had shoulder fatigue back during the spring. If you remember, they were considering the possibility of playing Turang at short, maybe making Joey Ortiz more of a super utility guy, doing something out at second. They couldn't do that. And I wonder if that power breakout was somewhat delayed, just by having that injury he was playing through for a part of the season. So it's just more of a question. And like you said, he could consolidate and combine some of that top end speed with that increase in power and really move up the board and somehow be a little undervalued at this price because he's a phenomenal defender, whether he stays at second base or eventually moves at short based on some other stuff they're able to do with the roster between now and God, who knows when, the end of the season, I guess we'll say. There's just a lot of ways for things to continue going right. And last season, Brice Turang finished as the 22nd hitter in the Fangraphs Player Rater. And that was at 18 homers and 24 steals because the average was great at 288, and the runs and RBIs were there too. 97 runs scored, 81 RBIs. I mean, at least against righties, he's going to be in a very prominent spot in that lineup. And then if he keeps playing consistently against lefties, which he should because of his glove, he's just going to drop a little lower in the order and get some at-bats later in the game against righties.
He did swing the bat faster over the course of the year, so it speaks to your narrative there about the shoulder. He went from 69.4 bat speed in March and April to 71.6, which is going from below average to above average. It's kind of fun. But I do have one question for you before we move on, is just Brice Turang on the Brewers, why did he steal almost half as many bases as he stole a year before?
Changes the first base coach. Like new... Quentin Berry left, and I believe it was Julio Borbon's first year in
that role.
Were they
generally less aggressive?
I don't think they were overall. I got to look at that trend again. It's a great question.
I think that they stole the base. I think they stole the most bases in baseball. Nope, they were second, but
yeah, they were 164 last year.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that the attempts were similar to the previous year, though, before punting on. I mean, they were aggressive in year one with Murph too. They had 217 in 2024 as a team.
That's
so
interesting.
You know, whether that's just like a learning curve and just getting on the same page
Or a
with
slight
the
philosophy
coaches,
change.
philosophy change. I mean, there's a lot of things. Or if you had a bad shoulder, like maybe, and again,
Don't want to
the
be
split.
sliding
I don't know if
into
the
it.
splits back this up. Maybe you're just being a little more careful on the base paths. There's a lot of reasons why that could fluctuate, but that was one thing that changed that may have had some kind of impact too. It's hard to isolate all of those things, but they're all factors in some fashion. The thing I mentioned, I think, on our last position preview, because I was getting just completely carried away with batted balls in the air at 95 plus. Brice Turang hit more batted balls in the air at 95 plus than James Wood and Jose Ramirez and Riley Green last season. So
That's weird because Jose Ramirez hits a lot of balls in the air. He loves hitting the ball in the air.
Yeah, I just think that's one of those things that when I saw it laid out that way, it gave me a little more confidence in the stickiness of the power, like holding up. And I also think just the increase in bat speed over the course of the season really supports that too. Like that doesn't seem fluky. Like tell me like why I should care about bat speed. To me, that's like one of the things you want to look for. You see a hard hit rate go up. Did bat speed also go up a lot? That really is a good
And he
sign
kind of did it just
something
by
sustainable.
swinging fast more often. Like, I don't think his max bat speed changed that much, but he just, he was a little bit more at his peak, which I don't know if it speaks to, potential injury or fatigue or whatever, but he kept it up and he finished real strong. When we speak of sort of year-to-year correlations, it's the one thing that is underlying a lot of this. Like, how sticky is that hitting the ball in the air hard? And it actually is pretty sticky. That is a pretty sticky skill. Our next guy, I think, in the next tier, Nico Hoerner, is he next up?
Yeah, let's move on to the next tier, which actually has a few players, and it has 4 to be specific, and a fifth if you want to count Ceddanne Rafaela at second base. We'll preview him on the outfield episode, even though it might make sense to use him at second. Nico Hoerner, Jose Altuve, Jackson Holliday, Luke Keaschall, all in this group. And Nico Hoerner is just sort of your kind of second base optimized average run stolen base guy. Like your more traditional, this is what a second baseman does sort of player. Also has a great glove that drives his playing time. We talked about the addition of Bregman bumping Shaw out of a job. I don't think that really has a significant impact on Hoerner's playing time. I think Hoerner's the everyday guy. If he's hurt, then they've got a guy they like in Shaw they can throw over there. But I think Nico Hoerner could be a max volume player. We have a career barrel rate of 2% over 2,800 plate appearances. So I don't think we're getting anything in terms of like extra power. This is, 6 to 8 homers is probably all you're going to get. But maybe we see him dial the speed up a little bit again in the walk year.
Yeah, the walk year, playing more, stealing more. The lead up where I was talking about the year-to-year correlations, like the fact that he makes a lot of contact, that's going to be true next year. The fact that, he plays good defense, that should be true next year, given aging curves. The fact that he'll steal some bases, all that is sticky, but the amount of stolen bases can go up. I mean, he went from 20 to 43 in 22 to 23, even, the batting average that results of that contact rate, he went from 273 in 2024 to 297. Nico Hoerner did. So, if he just has a bad season and it's 270, 5 homers and 25 steals, it's not that good. It's like, and that's all within the possibilities for him. I looked at how guys did over the last few years in terms of what they've done and in auction value, and he has a $21 season, an $11 season, and a $19 season. So, do with that information what you will. Like the average of that is 17, which would make him an undervalued guy, and you should pick him. But I do think that there is something to the fact that the things he brings to the table, can vary wildly year to year, even if the underlying skills are strong.
Yeah, and that
just have a
variance
bad
happened
year
over
with Babbitt.
3 seasons with 150 plus games played too, right? It's not that down year wasn't the result of lost time.
Yeah. So, but the nice thing about it is that if you're buying him right now, I think the suggested situation here is my comp values are $10. And he's going behind Turang, who's $12. So I think the suggested price here is around $11. Well, hey, you're buying the floor because his worst year was worth $11. So it's not a guy that I have on a lot of my builds because it does make it a little bit harder to rack up homers. Homers are usually the main sort of drive that I've got. But you could pair him with Vladdy, and get a bunch of steals and have a really good batting average and try to attack the kind of low. There are always low batting average sluggers later on, So that's why you can get those. You can paper that hole over later if you want.
I think the best use case I've found for Nico Hoerner is using him to make up some ground and steals, maybe on a team where I'm not expecting to win the category, but I'm okay kind of taking one shot there because of the other things he does well, because of the runs and the average being so good. If I went a little power and average heavy with my first few bats in front of him, I can try to be credible in stolen bases, not necessarily punt it, let that be my weak category, and take a few other shots later for speed without being over invested in that category, which, is something that once they changed the disengagement rules, made the bags bigger, my thought was there should be more bags around at various points in the pool. So I'm not going to go overboard hitting really high targets with my first couple of bats if I don't like the overall quality of those players. So yeah, it's more of a specific, this is what I need to do because I'm building this type of team sort of player for me. It seems appropriate at the price if that's what you're doing. Jose Altuve goes in this range. I would say he's probably aged a little better than I expected him to. Second basemen typically do not age well. And the average hit the lowest mark in a season, a non-COVID season, since ever. So 264. Like, that's not what you're used to getting from Altuve. It's not bad, but he used to be good, like very good, great, plus in that category. 10 for 16 is a base stealer. He's 36 years old now, so you see another tick down in production baked into the projections. Even if he continues to age gracefully, I'm starting to wonder, are we right to jump ship? Even if we're a year early, is it time to move on from Altuve? Or is this price still fair enough where you're looking at him and saying, the Astros still need him out there every day, so as long as he's not on the IL, he's a really high volume player in this range, and playing time at this position does start to wane as you move into the later tiers.
Yeah, I mean, my comp, that uses Steamer, the Bad X, and Oopsie all together, says he's an $11 player, but it says Oopsie says he's a $7 player. So there is some risk here because Oopsie has a 104 WRC plus projection for him and a 399 slugging. So a real drop off in slugging, while the Bad X says it's more of a 113 situation, or that Steamer says it's 113. The Bad X is more like Oopsie, saying this is going to fall off. The Bad X has always been a little bit low on Altuve because he doesn't have great barrel rates, but he makes so much contact that he puts barrels out there, even if his barrel percentage is not great, if that makes sense. And I see enough negatives with each of the guys we've gone through so far that I'm not really targeting anybody that we've talked about yet. And I still love the position. So, the one thing I want to point out with Altuve, the worst season he had in the last 3 years was still worth $9. So if you're buying here, you are still actually buying close to the floor, and there is ceiling above that, like the $14 Steamer projection. So there's a reason you can make up the reasons you like this guy, and he's probably a Hall of Famer, so maybe he's just on a different aging curve. But at 35, I'm nervous.
Yeah, it's fair. I think you can justify it at the price, but I think you're not necessarily going to be kicking yourself if you just let him go by either. There are a few other paths that we're going to try and go down here at second base. Jackson Holliday goes in this range. Still just 22 years old. It's easy to talk ourselves into some paths to improvement. The supporting cast is great. Makes me wonder, though, if that could cost him a little playing time. They can mix and match a little bit, platoon him at least occasionally, sit him against tough lefties. The career barrel rate so far, and again, he's still just 22, is 7.9%, 41.7% hard hit rate. I think that's good for his age. I think if that's what you get long term, maybe you're a little bit disappointed because he was the number one overall prospect in baseball for a few minutes. And I guess I look at the profile and wonder, like, is he going to get better at stealing bases? 17 for 28 is not ideal, but, you probably aren't going to say at 22, stop stealing bases. You probably keep working on it and see if you can make that a bigger part of his game. So I'm curious where you're at with Jackson Holliday in redraft leagues and even long-term leagues. Is he someone you're actually trying to get now and keep her in dynasty leagues if you find a willing trading partner?
I am fascinated by Jackson Holliday. I have him, in the lingo of my spreadsheet, bolded for being a potential value and italicized for being a potential bust.
Well, you used to be on a show called The Sleeper and the Bust. So
that's right.
Makes sense.
He's both of them. Here's the reason he's a bust is my comp dollar value is $4 for him. For Keaschall, it's $5. Ozzie Albies, it's $6. Stott, it's $7. So there's a lot of guys behind him that are worth more that you could just wait on. And that's my general. We're about to hit the part of the position I really love, which is I think you could really easily get a credible $5 second baseman late in your draft, no matter what your draft size is. So you don't have to reach for Jackson Holliday. That's the situation where you're calling him a bust. But, Oopsie says he's a $6 player. Steamer says he's a $1 player. So Oopsie that likes the athleticism that's underneath here. The Bat X says there's going to be more power, and that's because the 8% barrel rate you said should have produced better than a 130 isolated slugging than he's shown so far. So he's doing some things under the hood that are right. And then there's this last bit, which is just a young player trying to get used to the league. So look at his aggression here. So the red line is his chase rate. And normally I don't say this as a positive, but he has a really small chase rate. And what you see is over the course of the season, he became more aggressive. And guess what? He hit the ball harder when he was more aggressive. And if you look at his contact point, you see that he went from 25 points out in front of his body, which is 5 points less than league average, and it's about 7 to 8 inches less than the ideal contact point. The ideal contact point is around 32 to 33 inches out in front of your body when it comes to power and batting average and all that stuff. So just an analytically ideal contact point. He lets the ball travel too much. So he got more aggressive over the course of the season. His contact rate got closer and closer to 30. He showed more power over the course of the season, hit the ball harder. But there's also, ramifications in terms of what is the strikeout rate going to be like this? Can he be more aggressive and not strike out a lot? And with sort of below average bat, he has like first quartile bat speed, so it's definitively below average bat speed. Is he better served at letting the ball travel and spraying the ball all over and, having a low strikeout rate and a high batting average and high OBP? Or should he go and get that ball and hit for more power? He's at, I think, a turning point in his career in deciding which of these ways he's going to go. And that could go either way. So I think in 10-team leagues, he's a sleeper. In 15 team leagues, he's a bust. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I'm still on the up arrows side here. I mean, the K rate went from 33.2% as a rookie to 21.6%. Did a great job cutting that down. What you're showing me with that rolling chart is a young hitter who's controlled the zone well at all of his other professional stops, just learning against big league pitching and realizing how different it is, realizing that you got to take advantage of the opportunities earlier in the count when you get them, right? I think it's a lot of that baked in. If the floor is the projection, or the likely outcome is the projection, 250 average, 15 homers, 15 steals, 70 plus runs, 60 plus RBIs, and you take him at pick 120, you're going to be a little disappointed, but that's not going to wreck you. And I think you are getting a ceiling that might be more of a 23 homer, 20 steal player this year. I don't know what the long-term ceiling is. I think the keeper in Dynasty League question is the harder one for me. I think I can see more incremental growth in 2026, but I'm just wondering if previous estimations of Jackson Holliday's ceiling were just a tick or two too lofty.
I mean, the bats who say yes. When you have first quartile bat speed, you're not likely to, hit 30 homers. So if he's going to always be sort of a 15 to 20 guy, then he has to steal a lot more bases, like you pointed out. But there are some pathways to like semi-stardom, but I don't know if there's pathways to superstardom.
He's 22. He could get stronger and swing the bat harder. Like that's kind of the part where I'm like, okay, I'm not necessarily writing off the possibility of more bat speed, just being a little bit older, a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. So very curious to see where it goes. More in overall though on Jackson Holliday. What are you doing with Luke Keaschall? Is it a little more like a Nico Hoerner profile than we expected? I mean, the 5.2% barrel rate last year from Keaschall is better than anything we've seen from Hoerner as a big leaguer so far. So more like 12 to 15 homer power, I think, in a typical year, unless we see that tick up. Good plate skills, should keep him in a prominent spot in the Twins lineup. Maybe a fun would you rather with Holliday. I mean, there wasn't nearly as much prospect hype around Keaschall, even though he was a good prospect in his own right. But they go close enough in redraft leagues where this is a decision you may actually have to make a few times.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that Luke Keaschall is a risky profile because he hasn't established himself. He's a young guy. The power isn't something that you can rely on. But if you look at his, and I know this is a nation science and we're just figuring it out, but he has perfect comps. Like when you look at his swing tilt, how short his swing is, and his bat speed, he has perfect comps. Stephen Kwan and Jacob Wilson are perfect comps. Like in terms of, they have short swings, they don't swing hard, they make a ton of contact, and they have high tilt. Perdomo is actually pretty close, and so I'm comfortable actually saying, yeah, I think he can be Nico Hoerner this year. I think he can be very close to Nico Hoerner. Maybe it's maybe a little bit less batting average, maybe because he's got to hit for a little bit more power. But I think overall, I think he could be worth the same as Nico Hoerner and go, later in terms of ADP. What difference do you have on them? I've got 149 on Keaschall and 103. So you get 50 picks.
Yeah, 30 to 50. Maybe that gap's narrowing just a little bit, but yeah, like there's a couple rounds between them.
But I think that the risk here comes from don't just assume the barrel rate is decent and he had 4 homers in a third of a season, so he'll have 12 homers. I mean, there's a chance he hits 5 to 7 homers. I think. Yeah, it is a really weak bat speed.
He popped 15 though in 102 games between high A and double A in 2024. So I think. I'm at least one notch above the Nico power expectation, if not a little more than that. And I think going 14 for 17 in the big leagues last year over 49 games on the base paths, 11 for 13 at AAA. I think the steals, that's where that Nico Hoerner roto comp comes back in. It's like, I think he's going to be a really nice option on the base pass to make up some ground in that category. So 85th percentile sprint speed really backs that up as something that he can keep in his game. So even if you're worried about power, you're probably not worried about speed in Luke Keaschall's current toolbox. And there's a few ways it could click. It seems like he's got an ability to really square the ball up and do damage on the pitches he should do damage on, at least in the small sample we've seen so far. On to the next tier. This is where it gets really interesting because I think you can feel better than you probably should about some of these guys based on past performance. Ozzie Albies, Brandon Lowe, Xavier Edwards, Bryson Stott, Otto Lopez, also second base eligible. We talked about him on the shortstop episode. So I'm looking at this group, and the first guy in it is the most interesting to me by far. And I think the reason is something we discussed at the end of last season. Ozzie Albies said he finally felt like he was past his wrist injuries late in the year. And his pop started to come back. His second half slash line, 272, 330, 439. That looked more like typical Albies. Maybe he's just oatmeal at this point, but I wouldn't be surprised if he finished ahead of a few guys in that tier 3. Like if he ended up kind of joining Brice Turang in tier 2 value-wise, being less valuable, but clearly better than some of the guys people are drafting ahead of him, it wouldn't be the most surprising thing in the world based on some of the things he's been able to do in complete healthy seasons in the past.
Yeah, I don't have a great read on him. He's been a little disappointing for me. I thought this guy was going to be a superstar. And so to see, him kind of just be okay, He's a switch hitting guy with power and speed. This is a guy who, at one point in his career was 30-20 and 30-13 with a 280 average one of those years. He's been so bad at times. 2022, 247, 8 homers, 3 stolen bases, missed most of the year, missed half of the year. 2024, 251 batting average for Albies, 10 homers, 8 stolen bases, missed a third of the year. So last year's outcome, which was like meh, like 1.3 wins and 16 homer in terms of how good he was on the place, wins above replacement, 87 WRC plus, 16 homers, 14 stolen bases. Like it was okay, but it was worth $7. And he was once a $27 player, and then he was a negative $2 player, and then he was a $7 player. That is just a lot of up and down. I don't think I have him circled as someone I want to pick up.
No, I'm in. I'm very in on Albies. We'll have him on a couple of teams, and I think it's going to be close to the projections. Projections actually have a surprising amount of agreement on him. The average is probably where you see the most disagreement, but 17 to 19 homers on the 3 sets you see at Fangraphs, 10 to 12 steals. All of them are pretty much in the low 70s total for runs and RBIs. I mean, that's good. That's assuming a little bit of missed time in there as well. So I'm comfortable with that at this price. I think that's appropriate. When you get to that pick 150 range, you're doing fine if you waited at second base, and Albies is the one that falls to you in that spot.
He's 29 though, and there is a guy in this tier that has a similar comp projection that just feels safer and is younger, so it is a $6 player going behind Keaschall, $5, Xavier Edwards, $4. Jackson Holliday, $4. So there's even just like a projections argument for him. But Bryson Stott is in this tier. And I think Bryson Stott has just been a little bit more steady. Bryson Stott has been worth more than $5 in all of the last 3 years. There's only 5 players at this position that have been worth at least $5 over the last 3 years. Marte, Hoerner, Altuve, and Gleyber, Torres, and Bryson Stott. Also, Bryson Stott, over the course of last year, his fast swing percentage and bat speed has gotten better and better over the course of the 3 years, and he just had his best barrel rate. He's not adding bat speed in that like you compare swing to swing, it's getting higher. He's just choosing to swing faster some more. So he's going for homers a little bit. And I just see Stott at his age. He's now entering his 28. I know he's only a year younger, but he just seems so much more steady. You know what I mean? Like if I'm being risk averse, Stott seems steadier. He plays more. He's going to give you, 20 plus steals. He's going to give you 15 stolen. He's going to have, I think, a line that looks his projected line looks very close to Albies. I just think there's more risk aversion there for me. I think he's safer.
I think I flipped the power and speed expectations, though, whereas you look back the last 3 years, Bryson Stott, 87 steals against Albies 35. Albies has out-homered him 59 to 39. It's only 9 fewer plate appearances despite playing in 42 fewer games because of the missed time Albies has had. So it kind of depends on what you need. Average OBP are really reasonably close. Stott 262, Albies 258. Defensively, Stott's really good too, so I think that keeps his playing time up against some of the lefties he'll see. But I think there's a chance Albies plays even more than Stott. Like there's a little more volume on the side of Albies.
There is, and you're right to bring that up because Stott being a lefty, could he be platoon? He has been platoon in the past. But the interesting thing about his platoon splits is that, he's gotten worse against them year by year, but year by year stats, split stats aren't that useful. For his career, his lefty split, it's 87 WRC plus. His career overall is 93. So if he gets better there is some point at which he becomes better. Let's say next year he's a 115 WRC plus against righties. His expected WRC plus against lefties would be around league average, right? And so they may leave him in. Albies is not without platoon problems of his own, and the weird thing is he's much better against lefties, but he's still a switch hitter. So I think you're right to expect that if they were both healthy all year, Albies would get more playing time, and that is super important.
That's the appeal for me, but I understand the case for Stott, and I think I like Stott a little more than both the two guys that go in between Albies and Stott. Brandon Lowe had his healthiest season since 2021. That brought a return to the 30 homer level, 13.1% career barrel rate. I like this move for the Pirates. Like, I think they needed to get some thump. They found it in Lowe. They found it in a couple other moves they made too. But I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, he brings that power, but he has a long track record of not being effective at all against left-handed pitchers. So you probably, if you're not in a daily moves league, you have to think carefully about how you build your roster to make sure you've got someone you can plug in when they catch a couple of lefties on the schedule for any given part of the week. So that's the drawback on Brandon Lowe. And then, of course, he's had some significant injuries kind of wrapped around that time in Tampa Bay. He's been able to hit the ball really hard despite it, but he's a format-specific player, I think, for me.
Yeah, I mean, 680 plate appearances in the lefty split where he has a 92 WRC plus. He's 8% worse than league average against lefties. Lowe has been, he's been 33% better than league average against righties. You'd expect him to be above average against lefties given his righty line. That's how you'd project him. So maybe the Pirates are saying, hey, we're projecting him that way. We're going to play him against lefties and see how it works. But 680 plate appearances is getting along to the point where you're like, maybe there's just something about the way he swings. I would hope that some of the swing path analysis could project platoons better. The way that stuff analysis has helped us be like, oh, sweeper is better against same-handed than the opposite-handed. You know, we have platoon splits in Stuff Plus. If you had a bat path grade, you might be able to say certain swings, certain shapes of swings have just worse platoon splits, and we can project them better if we know the shape of their swings. There just could be something about the way Lowe sets up at the plate, the way he swings, that's just like he's never going to hit lefties. And I think it's probably safe at this point to say he will lose that playing time. And so, you know, in daily leagues, I think he's still a player that is a strong pick around here because, you know, you could supplement him with some of the guys I like later in the position still. You know, but in weekly leagues, you're going to lose value there when it comes to RBI, runs, playing time. Steamer has a 501 plate appearance projection for him. That's the lowest other than the young guys Keaschall and Holliday so far.
The key, though, is figuring out who actually does get stuck in the platoons for the Pirates because they may have to just see what happens with Lowe. My concern comes from the strikeout rate. It's not that he's helpless, like you said. It's a 92 WRC plus, but a 32.4% K rate for his career in that split. He's at least going to get dropped in the order in those matchups. Maybe they pick their spots a little more carefully. I'm intrigued, but the injury history also kind of weighs on my mind too as I think about how I want to chase power at this point in the draft.
They're definitely going to platoon right now in left field where it's Mangum and Sawinski out there. I don't think they'll platoon O'Neill Cruz. Brian Reynolds is a switch hitter. I think they're probably going to have some sort of platoon at first base with Spencer Horwitz, Ryan O'Hearn in the mix there. You know, so if you're platooning already at two other positions, then it comes out, do you give Jared Triolo the job or do you play around with that position? If you play around that position, then all of a sudden Brandon Lowe has to pretty much play every day, right?
Yeah. Maybe there's one more move there that'll help us fully understand what they're likely to do with the playing time, but that's what's on my mind as it pertains to Brandon Lowe. If you're chasing some speed at second base this late, Xavier Edwards can certainly help. He flipped spots in the middle infield with Otto Lopez last year. Certainly makes a lot of sense based on how that worked out defensively. I think what we saw from Edwards was BABIP normalization over a full season that put his slash line in a level that's probably actually sustainable for a little while. 283, 343, 353. To me, that's a pretty good snapshot of what Xavier Edwards is likely to do. It is a Nico Hoerner-esque low barrel rate, 1.2% for his career. He's not going to start barreling up the ball and getting to more power. This is closer to zero power with average speed and runs being the key. And then, of course, thinking about that Marlins lineup, if he's the high OBP table setter, then you're just relying on a few more of the younger bats they've added to take steps forward and make that a consistent sort of league average sort of lineup behind him if his value is going to pop with that profile.
Yeah, I think that all the stuff I said about Nico Hoerner that was, that there's this potential variance in the batting average and the stolen bases, and those are his biggest, his biggest assets. I think it seems like a little bit more on the knife's edge with Edwards because I don't know personally how good he is defensively. He was a bad shortstop defensively by the metrics, and so far has been a good second baseman, but it's not a big sample. And if he ends up being a bad defensive second baseman, that's a difference between him and Nico Hoerner. And if you just change the defensive projections to more of a minus, then he's not a league average player in a lot of the projection systems. For example, the BATX says he'll be an 88 WRC plus hitter with slightly above average defense and be a 1.5 win player in 587 plate appearances. So that makes me nervous. That's a player, and especially if that player doesn't have that defense and he gets a little bit worse on defense, I just feel like this is a Marlins team that, could decide that they want to at least see another guy at the position and start, playing Xavier and this other guy some more. I'm not sure that I have the name for you right now. It's just going to be this guy, but Sanoa, I like Sanoa, but like whatever it is, this profile seems risky to me. And Nico Hoerner has made this profile more safe by having standout defense every year. You're going to put him out there at least for the defense, right? Maybe Xavier Edwards is a Nico Hoerner clone, and then you can get, Nico Hoerner for a lot cheaper, later on in the draft. I mean, that's the use case. For me, I'm probably going to say no to Xavier Edwards.
I'm more optimistic about his defense because of how good things looked in the numbers, at least in year one at second base. 12 defensive runs saved. He was a +9 OAA. I mean, that's really good for 814 innings. So could be among the league leaders in what he brings to the table at second base over a full season. I'm just less inclined to build teams around guys that come out to like a 0 sort of power outcome.
Yeah.
Like Hoerner is cutting it as thin as I can possibly cut it in that regard. But there's a way to make it work. You just have to have a surplus of power already in your foundation if you're going to go that route with Edwards. It seems like the market has him fairly priced to the point where you can actually pull it off if you want to have him on your teams this year. It's just not the way that I like to play. Let's get to the next group. Tier 5. Matt McLain, Luis García Jr., Jorge Polanco, Gleyber Torres, Marcus Semien, and we'll say Lenyn Sosa also gets a little shout in this group too. It spans from pick 200 to about 275, so a little bigger than usual just to get everybody covered. But I get the sense, this is the bin that you really like shopping in.
There are a couple names now where I'm really getting into it. And, obviously, I like Keaschall some and Albies some and Stott some. So I'm already gathering guys. This could be where my MI comes from. But I just enjoy Matt McLain a little bit. He had the shoulder surgery. He had a problem there. If you look at his bat speed, by month, the further he's gotten away from that shoulder injury, the more his bat speed has gone up. I think we have a chart here for Stott where that shows his hard hit rate. His hard hit rate in August and September last year was 42% in August, 49% in September. You can see that gradually he's been hitting the ball harder over time. And I think he'll just get to, that pre-injury level. I think he's probably was there in September. And if you poured out, like a 44 or 45% hard hit rate, you would expect all of his numbers to go up. His BABIP, his slugging, all that stuff. And then just the fact that the projections are solid, other than Steamer, I guess he pooped in Steamer's cereal because Steamer has a 438 plate appearance number. Again, that's hand projected, and I think it reflects the risk of his injury history. But I think this is more like one big injury that has sort of, affected him. And I think that there's a big chance that he's a 650 plate appearance guy this year, 20 homers, 20 steals, 240 average. I love that. I believe more in the BATX projection, which has him as a $6 player. And this is a $6 player going behind $5 players, going really deep in drafts. So yes, Matt McLain is on my list.
Yeah, I think the ballpark helps. If he were to end up playing somewhere else, I might be a little more cautious, but there's definitely good speed, enough power. If he splits the difference between what he did in 23 and 25, that probably works really well for this Reds lineup. Still had a 40% hard hit rate after the lost 2024 season. I think that bodes pretty well. So you think about a banged up player getting you 15 homers and 18 steals. What can he do when healthy? So I think we're generally in agreement on McLain. Interesting to see that 20 of his 31 career homers have come at Great American Ballpark. But again, not a problem until he potentially plays for some other team down the road. Other guys in this tier, it's a mixed bag for me. I mean, I'm not into Luis García Jr. at all.
He's just been platooned too often already, so it's hard in weekly leagues.
I
The
should
defense
be
isn't good.
into it, but yeah, there's too many things that he just doesn't do well enough. It's a lower K rate, low walk rate profile with a good hard hit rate. Those actually jumped again, 45.8% for the hard hit rate, 9% for the barrel rate. So if you thought 2024 was an outlier in terms of quality of contact, it really wasn't.
Those
But
should have produced better power numbers too. I mean, maybe he'll be a 24 homer hitter next year. Like 9% barrel rate, it's not bad, dude.
One above average season in the big leagues, though, so far with 3 full shots at it. And he's below average with the glove, so there's just a lot of pressure on him to start.
He's like not
doing
that good
more
of a
now.
player. You know, he's like an okay fantasy player maybe if you just need that package, but like I don't love betting on not good real life players. You know,
I guess
even rebuilding teams like find better options eventually.
Yeah, and they're going through big changes though in that front office and on that coaching staff. Alex Hampel leads part of our video team. Like I think he pointed this out. Nats fan, watches them closely. Darnell Coles is out as the hitting coach, and that could change some things for at least some, if not all, of their hitters. I mean, part of the problem I feel like with Luis García for most of the time I've been trying to make it work for him has just been he hits the ball on the ground a lot too. At least he has in the past. That's sort of gone away the last 2 years. He's down in the 47.4 and 45.1% the last 2 seasons that are living above 50 over parts of 4 seasons in the big leagues before that. I mean, that's a critique of James Wood. There's just so many flaws with Nats players that you wonder what's coachable and fixable and what isn't. There has to be some room for improvement with changes in that organization, right? So I'm trying to leave my mind open to it, but it makes me more nervous about my previous call that CJ Abrams is being overdrafted than it does make me optimistic about Luis García Jr. given some of the shortcomings we've seen from him over a longer period of time.
Yeah, I just I don't know how great of a player he is, and I think there's other options in this tier that I enjoy better. I mentioned that Gleyber Torres has been a $5 player in the last 3 years. So I just think he's a super high floor guy. Torres is, and do I think going back to the Tigers was the best situation for him? No, but he did have an injury that affected him last year, and he played through it. So, could he? I think he's back in a contract year. He would play through whatever injury he had. But let's hope he doesn't have that injury. And if he doesn't have that injury, can he? Steal 6 or 7 bases and hit 20 homers. Like he's very close to the average baseball player, fantasy baseball player in 15-team leagues. And where he goes, like to get an average player and at this position, I'm down. I'm down with Gleyber Torres.
Yeah, I mean, playing hurt gets overlooked when you put up volume, right? If you're a pitcher and you still have basically a full season, you throw 180 innings and some of that was with, a bad hamstring or something was uncomfortable and you still just pitched anyway and performance goes down. We probably ding you more than we should in situations like that. With Torres especially, I think that was something I overlooked coming out of the season. He'll probably be closer to the guy he was in the first half when he was healthy, right? 281, 387, 425 before he was banged up. I mean, that's obviously what he's thinking by taking that qualifying offer and trying to get back maybe into like a low 20s home run sort of output. So yeah, Torres works fine where he's going. I definitely like him more than Garcia. I actually like him a little more than McLain if I'm just trying to play it as safe as possible. But if I'm trying to chase a little more speed, there's a case for McLain to be the preference in sort of a toss-up there. I'm wondering if we were
I
maybe
like
a little
McLain's
too
youth and upside a little bit, so I'll chase a little bit. The floor seems somewhat similar.
It's really
Speaking
it's
of
really,
floor, the floor gets really low on the next guy. Marcus Semien, the floor, I have to admit, is very low. But even his worst projection, Oopsie, who says he's going to be old and bad, says he's going to be a dollar player. So for me, Marcus Semien is circled as kind of a last chance saloon guy. I don't know that Brendan Donovan is an everyday player. I don't know that Tommy Edman is an everyday player. I don't even know that Lenyn Sosa is an everyday player. So, Marcus Semien is a guy that by steamer could be an $11 player. And I don't have anything fancy to say other than what if he has a resurgent year? He's likely to be out there and it could be a pretty good lineup. And, one projection system says he's at least a $11 player. You don't have to be so refined in how you pick your sleepers. Also, he goes so cheaply that, yes, you can have an argument that I don't take 30-year-old players, but you shouldn't be so stuck to that argument that if he just drops to you at the end of drafts and he can be your MI for nothing, then you should probably just do it.
Yeah, I mean, I just think if you're not confident that you're getting back to 20 homers, you are taking on a good bit of average risk for what will end up being like a league average power. He was 11 for 12 as a base stealer last year while missing some time, so maybe you're still getting 15 bags there. Projections still say, given the age, it's more like 9 or 12 in that category. He's fine. Like I have no strong argument against him. I do wonder if with the crowding they currently have in the depth chart, if that carries over into the regular season, if part of the goal is, we want to improve our infield defense, but we also want Marcus Semien to be healthy all season. Maybe there's a little bit of load management they can do just with some of the younger options they can play at the position. And the goal is to say, hey, we want Marcus Semien playing well in October. So 140 games is all we actually want to get from him. We don't need to push him to 700 plate appearances, which is pretty amazing. He hit that 6 consecutive seasons where it was possible. Like 2020 was in there. No one was getting to 700 that year because it was a 60-game season. But that kind of durability is something you just don't see in the game anymore.
And we said,
so.
You keep doing that until you don't, and he didn't last year. But what's kind of amazing is despite missing time, he still got to 534 plate appearances. So it wasn't a fully 0 year. I mean, even in terms of accrued value, Marcus Semien last year was a dollar player, and the year before that, 28 before that. So, it seems pretty clear that he's going to be above replacement in leagues of depth. Now, if it's 10 or 12 team leagues, then I'm easily taking Matt McLain in this tier if I'm taking anybody. And I could probably leave Marcus Semien out there.
Yeah. We skipped one of the other Mets that's in this group. He's going to play first base this year for the first time. It's Jorge Polanco. And I wondered if maybe we were a little too harsh on the Mets when they signed him to that 2-year deal, given what we eventually saw from Munetaka Murakami and Ryan O'Hearn, what the market bore for other players that are going to play first base DH type roles this year. When you look at Polanco's overall body of work, I mean, you see a guy that owns the skills of a double-digit barrel rate. He's done that consistently over a 5-year period. He's had big chunks of time missed with injuries, knee trouble being probably the most problematic of all of that. Given his age, you just wonder, how healthy is he going to be in any given year, given the stuff he's already dealt with? And then, of course, it's very hard to figure out. He just slashed that K rate so much last year. What amount of that is sustainable? I think we've seen him in pitcher-friendly environments for a couple of seasons, being in Seattle. We've seen him in cold places before during his time in Minnesota, so you have that early season concern about the weather being tough on hitting. So he's dealt with it in the past and put up big numbers. Where have you fallen on Polanco? I mean, the projections say a 240s average, low 20s home run power, non-zero speed, and pretty good counting stats on a per-game basis especially, but they do drag playing time down pretty heavily given the past injuries.
Yeah, I'm not super in on him. I mean, he's 32 years old, and if you look at the monthly splits last year for Jorge Polanco, you just get a pretty wild oscillation. I mean, he was a 23 WRC plus guy in May. In June, he had a 71. In March, in April, it was a 240. I mean, even when he got going in the second half, it was a 122 in August, 181 in September. I mean, he's all over the place. He had a 25% strikeout rate in August. He had a 12% in June. And, just set against the backdrop of this being one of his best strikeout rate years in 5-6 years, I I tend to I'm fading that strikeout rate. Like, I think he'll have nearly a league average strikeout rate. I'm going to put like a 21, 22, 23 number on there for strikeout rate. And, he does have okay patience, but it's not going to be a great OBP, I don't think. So you're putting a lot of ducks in your basket for power and for a guy who's going to City. And the barrel rates was last year 10% was good, but it's not outstanding. So I kind of think he's going to be like a 240, 18 homer hitter with like 4 stolen bases. I don't want to pay for that.
Fair enough. I think I'm kind of on board with the projections, and that ends up being okay at this spot. Like a little more in leagues where I've got the ability to stash him on the IL if he does get banged up again, though. So definitely a higher injury risk sort of player with all those absences on the ledger. Looking a little further, though, beyond pick 300, we've got some veteran depth guys that are kind of interesting, a few prospects at the position that might make an impact this year. Who sort of stands out to you? I mean, that could include some multi-position guys. You mentioned Tommy Edman earlier. Ernie Clement is second base eligible. Colt Keith is at second and third. Donovan second base only. Andrés Giménez, second short, I think is kind of interesting. Jeff McNeil getting to hit the ball in Sacramento for half his games kind of could be a more interesting than your typical oatmeal late. Jake Cronenworth, the always available late option, probably going to play a ton again in San Diego.
By 15-team leagues, there are $5 players down here. Jeff McNeil is a $5 player in my composite dollar values. Colt Keith is a $5 player. Chase Meidroth is a $5 player. Brendan Donovan is a $3 player. This is what I'm talking about in that you don't have to panic at second. This is what I like about the position. You don't panic. I hate positions that make me panic. First base makes me panic. Shortstop makes me panic. This one doesn't make me panic because I'm like, there's always something going on later. And, one way I want to point this out is like Andrés Giménez. So like his career WRC plus against lefties, he's a left-handed player, 92. Now, he's going to be their shortstop. Schneider is their platoon guy. Is Schneider going to come in for Andrés Giménez or for Addison Barger as the Blue Jays are constituted right now? And before you say, definitely Schneider because I think Barger's better. Definitely Schneider's going to come in for Giménez because Barger's better. Well, how many shortstops were platooned last year? And I don't mean, went from one guy to another guy. They were actually platooned. And I think the only guns I can come up with are Cleveland and Detroit.
Right, which is a little more of the we just don't have a guy.
I think it is too. I think it's more like they just don't know who it is. They're like, it could be one of these guys. We're just trying them out. It was more like the spaghetti against the wall situation than like we have a guy versus righty and a guy versus lefty. So I think that the Blue Jays will be tempted to just stick Andrés Giménez out there every day. And Andrés Giménez right now has a 526 plate appearance projection by Steamer. That keeps a lot of his values down. He could easily be a $3, $4, $5 player if he plays every day like I anticipate he will. So I just wanted to point out that even a guy like Andrés Giménez, who is projected for, like 10 homers and 20 steals, he's there for you late for cheap and might have better playing time than is projected for him right now.
I mean, all the projections have him as a below league average hitter. And the multi-year trajectory, he had that amazingly good year with Cleveland in 2022. He popped for a 141 WRC+. He's gone to a 96, to an 83, to a 70. And I realized injuries were part of the story last year. And maybe he showed us enough in October to feel like the rebounds that the projections are calling for are actually stable. But there's some overall just skills risk at the dish with Andrés Giménez.
He's not a good hitter. I mean, I'm basing a lot of this on the fact that I think he's a really great defender.
But they traded for him with a lot of time left on that deal. There's still 4 more years left on the extension he signed with Cleveland. They traded for it, so I think it'd be a little odd if they really punted on that now. I think they will probably give him another full year to prove that he's still at least a near league average hitter, even if it's still below. And maybe his defense provides enough value for him to be a 2.5 or 3 WAR guy, which, again, it enables him to just rack up counting stats.
And I think what you're looking for down here, this is the draft and hold tier, I think, a little bit. You're looking for a third second baseman. You're looking for a guy who will play. You're in a mono league and you just want a guy who will play. So the guys that leap off the page, like I'm worried about Colt Keith's usage. I'm worried about Tommy Edman's usage. I'm worried about Brendan Donovan's usage. I think he'll go to a team that'll probably have another option against lefties, and they'll do something. They'll play around with him a little bit. I'm even actually honestly a little bit worried about Chase Meidroth, and because I love the fact that he's on a bad team, he plays good defense, and he doesn't chase. So he has these certain abilities that suggest that, oh, maybe he'll just play every day. The problem is he doesn't chase, but he's super passive. So he swings at 50% of strikes. The league average is 65. So his Seager last year, and you can look at Robert Orr. It's not that Robert Orr is on Twitter. He's got a Streamlit in there. Seager is a plate discipline stat that looks at do you swing at hittable pitches and not swing at not hittable pitches, basically. And his Seager was 185th last year, right next to Luis Garcia and Trevor Story. So he may not actually have that great a sense of the zone. And if he doesn't have a great high OBP because pitchers find a way to manipulate his ultra passivity, they do have Lenyn Sosa. They do have young guys coming up. They may not need him to be an everyday player. So I think Meidroth is interesting, and I just drafted him as my second shortstop in a draft and hold because he could play every day and he could have a good OBP and he could be all right. But in this group, I think Andrés Giménez sticks out as a guy that I think will play every day. And then Jake Cronenworth, I think he'll play mostly every day. And he's been a top 15 second baseman if you just average the dollar values accrued over the last 3 years. So I don't think Jake Cronenworth is that great, but he's, for me, sort of last chance saloonish, him and Giménez. Oops, I screwed up. I waited too long. I just needed an above replacement guy near the end of my draft. Cronenworth and Giménez are slightly different profiles, but I think they can keep you off the floor.
All right, it's a fair way to look at it. We did talk about Willie Castro on the news episode that dropped. He's second base eligible. I guess we could just throw him in as part of like the late passable options, especially since he should play every day, likely at third, mostly at third in Colorado. We think that average gets boosted up a little bit, getting half of the games in Coors, but I think it's interesting that Christian Campbell has had so much hype just fade in the span of a year. And a lot of our conversations about what's left for the Red Sox to do involve finding help on the infield. But I guess the question is there really a defensive fit for Christian Campbell there? Like that's sort of the problem. Like he may just be more of an outfielder, which means they got to trade an outfielder to make room, trade an outfielder for an infielder, then put Campbell in. So where does Campbell sort of stack up for you in a group that also includes Christian Moore trying to break through in Anaheim, Travis Bazzana, who we have not seen yet in the big leagues? Maybe we see some stretch, maybe a long stretch of him with the Guardians this year. Like how do you stack up the young darts?
Well, I think the quality of team matters a little bit for me. So I'm a little bit more interested in maybe Nolan Gorman and Christian Moore and even a guy like Vaughn Grissom because those guys are on bad teams, honestly. And I think that there's just like an easier playing time, either pathway. So for Christian Campbell, he has to beat out, in the outfield, he has to beat out really good players. In the infield, he still has to beat out Romy Gonzalez, who's, I think, a solid player. At least Romy Gonzalez, has a niche right now hitting lefties. He has to beat out Marcelo Meyer, who's a way better defender than Campbell is, right? So he has to beat out a bunch of players, and this is a Boston team that I would assume is not done yet. I don't think they're going to look at that lineup and say, okay, job's done. We're ready for the season. So, you could take Christian Campbell now and then, at some point be like, oh, crap, they went and signed someone. Now he's the fourth second baseman on this depth chart. I mean, just remember, they traded for Vaughn Grissom. They gave him like 5 plate appearances, then put him in the minor leagues, and he never saw the majors again with them. Right? So I like bad teams down here. And Nolan Gorman, I think, is going to play pretty much every day, have a really bad batting average, and hit a ton of homers. Vaughn Grissom is going to be the opposite of that. I think he's going to hit 260 with like 8 homers and 8 stolen bases. Christian Moore, is a wild card. If he improves his strikeout rate at all, there's some good quality of contact in underneath there. Like Christian Moore has the best star potential down here, I think, and has a job. The last one I just want to throw out there that I do like down here is Cole Young. And I did a real quick thing where I just looked at barrel rate. I left max EV out. I know I hear people sometimes say maybe I overuse that or whatever. So I just looked at barrel rate and hard hit rate, and I just looked at the comps that you should get from if you do that for Cole Young. And they're all, like, not all, but most of them, actually they all slugged better than he did last year. And it's guys like Bryson Stott and Ozzie Albies and Nolan Shanuel and Geraldo Perdomo. And the average ISO was 141 and Cole Young's was .094. So you give Cole Young a .141 ISO and a full-time job like he has right now. I admit there's a risk that they pull somebody in, but Cole Young is a end of your draft and hold type guy. I mean, he's going way down there. So I just like that he is pretty good at a lot of facets of the game. And I think he has a role, and he should have hit for more power than he did last year.
Yeah, I keep wondering when the Mariners are going to flip the switch on a couple of those younger options on their infield. I mean, the J.P. Crawford slow decline, still a solid player, but it's clear. And I think this might be the final year of Crawford's deal, so maybe that's what really opens the door for Young and eventually Colt Emerson to also be a big part of the equation for them as well.
Will Salmon reported on 12/23 that Young is expected to see the majority of playing time at second base in the Mariners, even if the team acquires a second baseman from outside the organization. So
there you go.
I mean, they lie all the time,
they do. And their next best option really kind of steers just how long they'll stick with something too. I think you mentioned him briefly in the emergency pod. Ariel Amador, I mean, could be pretty interesting for draft and hold, NL only sort of purposes. It doesn't go inside the top 400 of drafts right now, so more of a wait and see, I think, for your typical in-season moves, 12 and 15 team leagues, but it wouldn't surprise me if he really moved into a spot to just be the second baseman for the Rockies this year. I'd like to see something like that actually materialize. I'm curious what you think of A's Max Muncy, because you talked about third base being a spot where another prospect could just come up and eventually be the solution there. But in the interim, it kind of looks like Max Muncy's the first guy that gets the crack at the job to begin 2026.
And he swings the bat decently hard. He has a 10% barrel rate and a 112.6 max EV. So that's the good sign. But I believe in the high strikeout rate, a 14.8% whiff rate. That's somewhat significant, even in 220 plate appearances, because that whiff rate is per pitch, and you want to have the denominator be the biggest sample you can be. And he saw a fair amount of pitches, so a 14.8% whiff rate, he could have a 30% strikeout rate. And I'm just not sure that quality of contact rises to meet that strikeout rate. You know what I mean? Like Nick Hertz is fine because he blasts the ball. Max Muncy hits the ball well, but also 30% strikeout rate. So. I don't know. It could work. The projections are like 89 WRC plus. And I don't know if that's because the park is so good, but even if let's say you think the park, the park changes or, mechanisms up. Well, he's projected for a 689, 685 OPS. We have long talked about the Jeff Zimmerman line. I believe that's 650. If you can't put up a 650 OPS, you're not going to start in the big leagues. Well, you know where the error bars are in a 680 OPS projection. They include a lot of 650s.
Yeah, and I know the player we're talking about chasing him is Tommy White. Tommy White was a second rounder in 2024. He played 27 games at AA last year, so it's not. I don't think it's an opening day threat to Muncy. It's more of the looming threat by August if Muncy doesn't either lower the K rate or increase the quality of contact. I just think
White needs to do a little bit better. Like honestly, he's been like around 10% better than league average in the minors coming out of college. That's he's not beating down the door.
Right. There's a little window. So I think the other Max Muncy is still kind of interesting to me for really deep leagues, given what we know about how the ballpark in Sacramento plays. Any of these other deep league guys that are actually on your radar or on your mind?
I picked some Von Grissom, man. I picked some Cole Young. I put my money where my mouth is on those guys. I think it does get a little hairy afterwards. One thing I will tell you is that there is somebody down on this list that'll be relevant, that might even be a starter, because second base is where teams just find guys. So could Hae-Seong Kim establish himself as the starter in Dodgers? That would be harder because it's such a great team. But somebody like Nick Gonzalez in Pittsburgh, he could emerge from the scrum there with a job. Pittsburgh is left field right now is super open, so he may not actually be playing second base, but he could be an important player there. Thomas Sagasi, I mean, St. Louis is going to go to a complete, let the kids play, I think, with the way that they paid to get rid of the veterans. So Thomas Sagasi, I want to hold on to something, but I can't. With Sagasi, I was like, oh, he makes a lot of contact. Well, he's projected for a 25% strikeout rate. I'm like, oh, it's good contact. Well, it's not that good contact. Oh, it's good defense. Well, he's a second baseman. How good could the defense be? You know what I mean? So I can't tell you other than team situation that Tom Sagasi. And then Zach Geloff, there was a lot of hope about this guy at some point. And I know that Jeff McNeil is penciled in for the Athletics as the starter at second base, but he's also played in the outfield, and third base is still open. So Geloff might be the guy that pushes Muncy off if he gets going again.
Yeah, I think it was Mike Gianella, our friend over at BP, at least a year ago now, said Geloff was giving him Keston Hiura vibes, and that has been a really good call. Over the course of the last year or so. Hopefully for Zach Geloff's case, he's got an adjustment or two he can make to avoid continuing down that comp path. But man, that was a heck of a call. You don't like making calls like that when they're negative, and when you get them wrong, you kind of maybe feel bad. But good call by Mike, at least as far as Geloff not bouncing back up to this point. Because I liked him when he broke through. I actually thought, we talked about Geloff versus Matt McLain as a toss-up before injuries bit McLain, and before actually injuries are part of the story with Geloff too. Maybe that's part of why he's had a hard time getting back on track.
Oh, and shout out to Gavin Lux now. I mean,
he'll pick up second base eligibility eventually.
Really boring way to get value, but if you pick him in draft and holds and you need a third second baseman, I think that's a pretty decent use of mono leagues. You have to figure out second base for a couple of weeks before he's playing for you.
It's just a bench guy that adds eligibility that maybe if he can unlock something is interesting, but it's a dart throw in the purest sense of the word. All right, a lot of ground covered on this episode. Who's your actual sleeper or undervalued second baseman that you are targeting most heavily?
Oh, good God. It's been so long, I forgot. What did I put down?
You wrote all
Matt
of
McLain,
them,
baby.
You wrote all of them at first.
I wrote all of them because I'm the king of. But if I'm looking for a sleeper at second base, the reason I put down all of them is because I really like the second half of this position, and I like guys that I think are going to be cheap, like Gleyber Torres and Bryson Stott, and I like Matt McLain because he has power and speed, and he's getting healthy. The shoulder is getting healthy. You see the hard hit rates go up, and I think he could hit 20 homers this year. He's in a great home park, and the speed is there. So there's a potential here for him to hit 240, 250 with 20 homers and 20 steals and be beyond his projections, which already say he's pretty much like a $4 or $5 player. So I'm in on Matt McLain late in drafts. Gleyber Torres and Bryson Stott bring similar arguments to the table that they are just super cheap and have jobs, have power and speed, and even a little potential for breakout.
How about a bust?
I gotta stick with Xavier Edwards as my bust. I'm just a little bit nervous about a developing team like this and a line like this. I'm just not sure about the defense. The defense is going to keep him on the field. So if he's going to be a great defender, he'll be on the field, but he also does weird things to your power. If you need to get 20 to 25 homers from every spot in your roster and you get 5 homers from Xavier Edwards, that means you got to get 50 from another slot. You got to do a lot of work and the rest of your team to make Xavier Edwards work for you.
I think that's a fair assessment of a guy that has a lot of categorical weight coming from a smaller number of places and the way that team is built. So those concerns seem fair at this point. On the sleeper side for me, it's Albies. I think you're getting a guy that could bounce back into top 5 at the position, outside the top 150 overall. I'm confident that the narrative around his wrist being healthy is real, and he can avoid some lengthy IL stints this year. Some of the injuries he's had have been more of the bad luck sort of variety, but I understand the variance over time has pushed some people away. So he strikes me as the undervalued guy that I'm really kind of circling as a quote-unquote sleeper, even though people know who Ozzie Albies is. He's been around for a long time and had some really nice seasons.
Did you see him like cleaning his big fish tank?
Yeah. I mean,
fear.
if you have the means to find something like that sparks joy in life, by all means,
go get some killer piranhas.
Go get the huge fish tank and put on the gear to clean. That's great, man. I love it.
One thing that's underrated about Albies, I brought this up with Tommy White. I think he loves playing baseball. There's something about the way he plays baseball. I think he loves playing baseball. I know he doesn't love talking to media, and I've talked to him about this fact that I love the way he plays baseball, and it didn't get anywhere with him. But I just, maybe it's also guys who can hit triples. I just love the helmet flying off and them turning around second, and it's my favorite play in the game. So I like watching Albies play. Not for nothing.
I'll throw Jose Altuve down as the bust, as the official call as a bust. I think it's a soft bust, though. I mean, I think it's just continuing to age gracefully. I'm just going to go a little bit younger at the position, which is easy to do since Jose Altuve is pretty much the oldest guy that plays second base at this point.
I think injuries are going to come forward. He's going to have a year where he just has 300, 400 plate appearances. And will that be this year or next year or whatever? It's going to happen.
Yeah, I think it's been more fluky stuff when he has been hurt so far, but when you get to 36, the soft tissue stuff, your back, stuff starts to bother you more. So I'm just cautiously going around Altuve and just taking other players in that range and taking advantage of some quality players available later at second base this year. So hopefully I am right about that, but we'll see. Maybe me calling Altuve a bust means he has one more amazing year in him and everybody else can reap the benefits of that. And if that works out, then I can live with that. Join our Discord if you haven't done so already. Lots of lively conversation there, especially with the big Tucker deal, fantasy strategy conversations. It is there all under one roof. Be sure to like this video and listen to the podcast wherever you listen to shows if you want to take it a little more portable. YouTube works, but Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you want to listen, we are available there. We are off on Monday, but typically we are here every single weekday from now through the World Series. Thanks to our producer, Brian Smith, for putting this episode together. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Tuesday.
Thanks for listening.